Those who act based on steadfast beliefs know that more can be lost from indecisiveness than from a misstep. In the circumstances of swift war, where every moment holds great value, it is especially important to act correctly and not doubt the righteousness of the chosen path. Justifying those who have committed treason, people often speak of villains capable of misleading and corrupting with their vile example. However, one must not forget that a person's bad qualities and actions depend solely on themselves. Our hero today, Ferrus Manus, a Primarch who unhesitatingly accepted his destined role as an instrument of war and did not turn away from it even in the face of death. The incubation capsules stolen from the Emperor's laboratory with infants inside were scattered across the galaxy. Some Primarchs were fortunate to land on civilized planets and grow up in benevolent societies, while others ended up on inhospitable worlds with scarce resources. Among the most hostile planets to human life can be named Inwit, the icebound homeland of Rogel Dawn devoid of light, and Nocturne, racked with earthquakes which sheltered the Primarch Vulcan. But the place where Ferrus Manus grew up surpassed any other in terms of danger. The capsule with the Primarch fell on the planet Medusa, located in the Segmentum Obscurus near the Eye of Terror. This cold world is several times larger than Terra and orbits the supergiant star Sthenelus. The icy winds on the surface reach speeds of 1,000 kilometers per hour, and the lifeless soil constantly quakes from earthquakes. Before Ferrus's arrival, humans on Medusa could only lead a nomadic lifestyle, as the terrible climatic conditions did not allow them to stay in one place. In addition, the orbit was filled with numerous shipwrecks, space wanderers and shattered planetoids, parts of which occasionally fell onto the planet. The planet was also surrounded by the ancient Tel-Starax station, encircling the world along the equator. The dead ruins of Age of Technology were also gradually collapsing and falling to the crater-covered surface of the planet. The planet had scant flora and fauna, and the rays of the nearest star could not bring warmth due to the extremely dense atmosphere. According to the Mechanicum records, the world was populated during humanity's technological peak and was highly valuable, as it possessed vast deposits of rare resources. For this reason, during the Age of Strife, neither Mars nor Old Earth forgot about the existence of Medusa, as happened with many other planets. Genetic research showed that the world's population descends from several different groups of survivors, only a part of whom trace back to the original colonists. Others, presumably, are descendants of the crews of ships sent by Mars in search of the legendary Medusa that had crashed. These various waves of survivors turned into warring tribes of techno-barbarians locked in desperate conflict with each other. Due to the ever-shifting landscape, where mountains and seas could swap places each season, humans were forced to wander the planet with an enormous machine. The protective mechanisms of these fortresses were partly based on STC systems, mining and assembly complexes. Massive machines, powered by thermal reactors, slowly but unstoppably crawled across the devastated surface, moving people to safer territories. The Medusans retained, albeit in a highly distorted form, the beliefs of the cult Mechanicus, adding to them an additional array of superstitions and strange rituals. They zealously safeguarded the remnants of past technologies, preserving fragments of knowledge about cybernetics and mechanics. Yet they lost any semblance of civilization, reverting to the level of primitive hunter-gatherers. Tribes waged unending wars for scarce resources, enslaved each other, and committed murder. A bloody struggle was the natural daily reality, where only the strongest and most ruthless survived. On one of the grim Medusan days, the cloud-veiled sky was pierced by a meteorite that crashed into the icy peak of the highest mountain. The impact split the mountain, burying a capsule containing a Primarch under the stone mass. The collision was so powerful that its consequences were felt across the entire planet. The arrival of the Primarch created new mountains, abysses and chasms on the surface. Entire ridges turned to dust, and many said that on that day, Medusa came to life. Details about the early years of Ferrus Manus remain fragmentary and contradictory. This is not due to deliberate secrecy, but to the reticence of the Primarch himself and the people of Medusa, who lost most of their sources due to their barbaric way of data preservation. The available information is essentially a generalized collection of sagas, recounted orally over centuries. For this reason, it is difficult to distinguish what exactly happened in Ferrus's history and what was added by the storytellers. In later times, reflecting on his past, the Primarch himself sometimes could not precisely separate truth from fiction. The northern peak into which Ferrus's capsule crashed was considered a cursed place, home to ominous shadows of dead iron-skinned monsters from ancient tales. In the legends of Medusa, it was in this territory that the Primarch accomplished a series of feats requiring not only strength but cunning. Ferrus Manus travelled the planet in search of an opponent he could consider his equal. However, none of the rivals could match the Primarch in power. Then, according to legend, Ferrus challenged a storm giant, calling him to measure strength. The giant managed to lift a mountain and carry it several kilometers, but his triumphant laughter ceased when the Primarch lifted the entire mountain range and transferred it to a neighboring island. Since then, the poor and humiliated giant was seen no more. Ferrus explored the planet and its bowels like no one before, climbing the highest mountains and swimming across the deepest oceans. No man on Medusa could match, in endurance, strength and fury, the most prized qualities of a man according to the locals. His name was known in every clan, and all of them would be glad to welcome the Primarch into their fold. The main legend about the deeds of young Ferrus tells of a titanic battle between the Primarch and Asenath, the great silver serpent. According to legend, Asenath, a monster with living metal skin, hid in the mysterious northern wasteland. These dangerous lands, where spirits penetrated the world of the living, were filled with metallic and stone relics of gigantic sizes. Studying the Song of Wanderings, imperial scholars concluded that the territory described was very similar to the ruins of Necron structures. This information may lead to the conclusion that Asenath, with high probability, was a creation of the Catan or Necrons, made from the material necrodermis. Ferrus could not defeat the beast with brute force alone, as the blows of his fists, capable of breaking an anvil, did not produce a noticeable result, and blades and spears broke against the sturdy skin. The Primarch threw the enemy into the lava and held its writhing body under its streams until the beast subsided. Ferrus's hands were burned and bled, but did not lose their strength. The Primarch saw the magnificence of the dying serpent, but was obliged to kill it to prove his superiority. When Ferrus Manus released the dead enemy and pulled his hands out of the lava, they were covered in the same silver metal as the skin of Asenath. The material was flexible like flesh, but at the same time stronger than the strongest ceramite. It changed the Primarch's limbs almost up to the shoulders, leaving only the upper part of the arms uncovered. Where the living metal fused with real skin, there were terrible scars. In addition, after the battle with Asenath, the eyes of Ferrus Manus acquired the same silver color, indicating how deeply the alien material penetrated his body. Having completed the adventure, Ferrus finally came to the inhabitants of Medusa, telling them of his plans and inviting all those who wished to join. In those days, the Primarch first took up blacksmithing. He created unusual, powerful tools from metal using only his remarkable hands. Under the guidance of Ferrus, the clans became much stronger, and new devices and technologies became available to them, about which the barbarian tribes could not have dreamed before. Civilization began to develop at a rapid pace, and the people of Medusa gained pride. The power of Ferrus Manus was held by personal strength. He demanded full obedience and brutally killed anyone who tried to dispute his word. The Primarch subdued the disparate clans to himself, but did not stop their feuds and competitions, as he was convinced that only war could make people strong enough. The Medusans recognized the authority of Ferrus Manus, considering him an embodiment of a god and asking nothing in return. The Primarch did not bring them peace, but he did raise Iron Fathers, engineers capable of reviving the mechanisms of the Dark Age of technology. These specialists, personally trained by Ferrus, joined each tribe and occupied an important position in the clan hierarchy. The Iron Fathers took upon themselves the maintenance of ancient mechanisms possessed by this or that group, and conveyed to their lord the technological secrets discovered. Thanks to the Primarch, the Medusans were able to create weapons of a new type and more advanced tools for battling each other. Ferrus Manus also led the bravest warriors of the clans to delve into the frozen realms below, breaking open long-sealed vaults and intruding into ice-buried fragments of the great machine works that had plunged from the skies in ancient days in search of salvage and strong metal. In the depths, the warrior bands and the silver-eyed giant who led them fought degenerate mutants, living dead cyborgs whose decayed flesh hung in tatters from corroded metal bodies, and subdued the dark engines of the nightmare ages that had gone before to take their plunder. By the time the Emperor had come to claim him for the Great Crusade, Ferrus Manus was warlord, demigod and sage to the people of Medusa, and it is said that he was waiting and that he more than half suspected the true purpose of his creation. However, their first meeting was not simple. Ferrus did not want to simply submit to a stranger who named himself the Emperor. Initially, father and son fought with each other, subjecting the planet to yet another disaster. Legends say that during the battle, entire mountain ranges were turned to dust. Ferrus, for the first time, encountered an opponent he considered his equal, and agreed to recognize the Emperor as his master. The father accepted his oath and handed him command of the 10th Legion. Ferrus quickly adapted to his new role and immediately began to demonstrate his efficiency. This was facilitated by his clear aspirations to the tasks at hand, high intellect and diligence. He knew his role in the great endeavor of the Emperor, was fully in agreement with it, and did not demand anything else, considering himself a weapon in the hands of the Emperor of mankind. Ferrus gave the 10th Legion the name Iron Hands, and also divided it and reassembled it in the order he deemed correct. He created an elite unit called the Morlocks, which included the most experienced veterans of the First Company. These Space Marines spearheaded the battles and also served as the honor guard of Ferrus himself. Medusa was turned into a base and the main headquarters of the Legion. This allowed for the unification of the local population and the Astartes, eliminating parts of Terra's heritage that the Primarch disliked. What was previously called an order was renamed a clan, and among the Astartes, Iron Fathers appeared warriors combining the duties of tech marines and chaplains. The legionaries settled on the planet, eliciting awe from the local inhabitants who saw them as demigods. This was done intentionally. Ferrus wanted the nomads, who valued strength above all, to see with their own eyes what their children could become if they chose the fate of humanity's defenders. Many Primarchs, after their planet's accession to the Imperium, utilized all available resources to improve the life of their homeworld. They built fortified citadels, established the delivery of supplies and water, and did everything possible to allow people to finally feel safe. However, Ferrus did not regard such actions as correct. He ensured that joining the Imperium did not lead to the easing of the local population's life, did not end conflicts, and did not eradicate barbaric traditions. Ferrus continued to believe that hardships and obstacles were the best conditions for raising the most warlike and psychologically prepared recruits. But since the population of Medusa remained small due to all the adverse factors, the Iron Hands also took a tithe from conquered worlds. Boys of suitable age were sent to the Primarch's homeworld, where they learned to live and fight. The strongest among them became Space Marines, and those less fortunate perished. This cruel and grim tradition stayed with the Iron Hands for millennia, making these warriors a model of merciless weaponry. Ferrus earned the respect of most Primarchs, and despite his difficult nature, befriended many of them. A common passion and views on the Great Crusade brought Ferrus Manus closer to Vulcan. They were united by harsh upbringing conditions and a love for the blacksmithing craft. However, the brothers had different attitudes towards mortals and their concerns. For this reason, soon after finding Vulcan, the Emperor sent the Iron Hands and Salamanders on a joint mission. By the design of the Master of Mankind, the merciful Vulcan was to show Ferrus by his example that humans are vulnerable beings they are meant to protect. The Primarch of the 10th Legion was shocked to see how his brother almost perished, risking himself to save a single child. Vulcan's act revealed to him that the right to live belongs not only to the strongest. Studying the characteristics of Primarchs, most researchers agree that Roboute Guilliman was the most gifted strategist among them. But the Ultramarines himself distinguished Ferrus Manus among the rest. He called him his friend, as beloved as Sanguinius and Horus, and was the only one who knew that Ferrus possessed mental strength that allowed him to withstand the severest psychic attacks. Roboute called the Primarch of the Iron Hands one of the fearless, someone he could rely on to the greatest extent. According to Guilliman, acting together, the 13th and 10th Legion could win absolutely any war, no matter how powerful the enemy was. Contemplating a scenario in which the Imperium would face a threat of total annihilation, Roboute planned to rely on the one who would never falter. Ferrus Manus, a faithful, relentless and most steadfast among the allies of Ultramar. During the period of the Great Crusade, the friendship between the Primarch of the Iron Hands and Fulgrim the Phoenician was well known in the Imperium. According to legend, their first meeting took place in the greatest forge of Terra, located beneath the highest peak of the Ural Mountains. There, Ferrus Manus worked alongside the finest masters serving during the unification wars of the Terrawat clan. When the Primarch demonstrated wonders of the smithing art, crafted with his astounding living metal hands, Fulgrim appeared in the workshop. Until then, the brothers had known of each other only through rumors, but at their meeting, each felt an inexplicable connection that had formed between them even before their birth. In front of the astonished masters, Fulgrim declared that he had come to the forge to create for himself the most perfect weapon with which he intended to fight in the Great Crusade. Such boasting could not go unnoticed by Ferrus. He retorted to his brother that his feeble hands would not be able to forge a weapon capable of competing with the creations of Manus himself. The Phoenician accepted the challenge, and both Primarchs set to intense work. For 3 months, the clanging of metals and the brothers' exchange of jests echoed throughout the forge complex. Fulgrim crafted the forge breaker capable of destroying a mountain with a single blow, while Ferrus created a fire blade with a golden edge that contained the essence of the forge's flames. Each weapon was magnificent, but upon viewing their brothers' creations, both Primarchs admitted defeat. The Phoenician proclaimed the shining sword worthy of the legendary hero Nuada Silverhand, while Ferrus Manus had sworn that only the mighty thunder gods of Nordite legend were fit to bear such a magnificent warhammer. Following this, the Primarchs wordlessly exchanged their creations, sealing their eternal friendship with this gesture. The weight of Ferrus's hammer was so great that it seemed too heavy for any other Primarch to wield. Its blackwood handle was adorned with gold and silver lightning bolts, and its striking part was carved in the shape of an eagle's beak, with pointed wings. Everyone who looked upon this weapon understood that its creation included something greater than mere skill. The majestic hammer encapsulated the noble qualities of the creator, embedding in it friendship, loyalty, and honor. However, the weapon was not the only gift from Fulgrim that lasted through the centuries alongside the 10th Legion's Primarch. According to legend, Ferrus's name, Gorgon, was also coined by the Phoenician. It is believed that once, Primarch Sanguinius arrived at the imperial palace, bringing with him elegant statues, marvelous ancient adornments, and numerous precious stones. The hall, filled with gifts from the great angel, was illuminated with a radiance that immediately enchanted Fulgrim. However, Ferrus did not share his brother's admiration, which he declared aloud. The Primarch of the Iron Hands considered the contemplation of adornments a waste of time that would be far better spent conquering the galaxy. At these words, Fulgrim laughed and called his friend a terrible Gorgon. In the Phoenicians' view, a Primarch who saw no value in beauty would never be able to appreciate the splendor of the stars that they were destined to reclaim for their father. Ferrus Manus did not grow angry at Fulgrim for such a nickname and considered it quite fitting. The Primarch called himself ugly, and he was flattered by the notion that enemies might turn to stone from fear at the mere sight of him, as it was in the myth about the ancient Olympic monster. Soon, the nickname Gorgon was used by his brothers, and thereafter by the Space Marines. However, The categorical opinion that Ferrus was unable to see the value in beauty did not match reality, as according to his sons, the Gorgon did indeed have a small collection of artworks. The Iron Hands joined the Great Crusade, becoming the backbone of the 52nd Expeditionary Fleet. They acted according to the Primarch's beliefs, which stated that any weakness in mankind must be eradicated. Quite often this led to extremely cruel actions towards the civilizations they encountered. As sources tell, the harsh fame of the Iron Hands sometimes preceded the fleet. This led to the inhabitants of some planets, upon learning of the approach of the 10th Legion, being covered by a wave of piety and self-error analysis. One of the notable missions of the Iron Hands was the subjugation of the world of Caldera, entered into the Imperial Archives under number 1544. The planet was inhabited by Eldar, and humans were in fact descendants of the Salamander's homeworld of Nocturne, who had been liberated from Drukhari captivity by their Craftworld kin. In this war, the allies of the Iron Hands were the Salamander's Legion and the Death Guard. The Eldar disoriented the Space Marines with their tactics and actions, while the regiments of the Imperial army succumbed to panic, and many of them fell victim to their own fear. The situation was complicated by the fact that since the beginning of the campaign, the Gorgon was tormented by strange nightmares about fighting in the Black Sands, causing him unknown anxiety. But the main blow came from the Eldar manipulations, separating Ferrus Manus from his sons during one of the battles. Then, the Xenos' magic interfered with the mechanisms used by the Imperial forces. Bionic parts of some warriors started acting on their own, attacking their owner. The Elder foresaw the future of the Primarch of the Iron Hands and tried to warn him, locking him in a psychic labyrinth. This decision sparked disputes among the Xenos, as even aliens understood how stubborn, and from this sometimes myopic, Ferrus Manus was. However, the warning was still shown. The Primarch found himself in a vast cave which seemed endless due to the darkness reigning inside. Dim light only penetrated through a crack that had split the dome in half. Looking at it, Ferrus decided he had accidentally fallen underground during the battle with the enemies. Gradually his eyes made out under the dome's vault columns, ancient cracked frescoes and triumphal arches. There were also stone statues, whose faces were destroyed by time. One of the sculptures, depicting a noble warrior, was headless, and as if accusing, pointed a finger at Ferrus. The Primarch made his way into the next chamber, where he heard a mournful song that engulfed his soul in sorrow. Until that moment, Ferrus had never experienced true grief. He had felt pain upon learning of the death of his sons, but accepted the necessity of such, as the role of a warrior entailed risk. Then, the Primarch's mind was filled with visions of his beloved brothers on the brink of death, or even slain, and the image of the dead Emperor. Ferrus realized he had become the victim of yet another sorcerous trickery by the Xenos. The melancholy in his soul was replaced with fury. He wanted to find and tear apart those who tried to deceive him. But the Eldar did not respond to his demands to appear, and instead placed a new vision into the mind of the Primarch. Ferrus was nearly deafened by the dreadful cacophony of battle, at the center of which he found himself. He did not see what the Eldar predicted for him, nor could he understand on which planet the slaughter was occurring. All that was clear to him at that moment, wherever and whenever the battle was taking place, it was hell. Scenes shifted one after the other. Ferrus saw the death of First Captain Gabriel Santar, and then similarly agonizing deaths of other sons. The screams of thousands dying shook the Primarch and brought him to his knees. From such horrific visions, any other creature might have gone mad, but Ferrus managed to restrain his emotions and stand up. Clenching his teeth, the Primarch was able to dispel the vision of the torturous demise of all the Morlocks without exception, and escape from the endlessly repeating nightmare. After that, the father of the Iron Hands was once again presented with the subterranean hall, now split in half by a narrow stone bridge. On the other side of the abyss was a steep staircase, and the Primarch found himself at its foot the moment he thought about it. Along the ascent were marble statues similar to those Ferrus had encountered in the first cave, but much more massive. All figures were clothed in patrician robes, and their hands folded on their chests, were joined in the sign of the Aquila. The faces of the statues wore totemic masks, which either concealed true essences or conversely exposed them. Ferrus Manus suspected that both interpretations were correct. The moment the Primarch took the first step on the staircase, his attention was captivated by one of the marble figures whose hair consisted of several snakes intertwining into a bun similar to that of the Gorgon from ancient myth. Ferrus reached out to the statue, but could not touch it. Another sculpture resembled a dried skeleton, with a scythe and in the garb of death itself. The face of the next figure was split in half like that of Janus from ancient Roman legend. Behind it was a statue with the mask of a snarling dog, which provoked Ferrus's anger, and another, whose face resembled a dragon with a crest of living flame. The Primarch saw a stone knight, behind whom stood his dark twin, a figure with black wings and a bat mask so closely resembling a real face that it evoked thoughts of lost humanity. Further, Ferrus noticed statues in masks of a horse with a flowing mane, a predatory bird, a lion hidden under a monastic robe, and then saw an open, noble human face, crowned with a laurel wreath. The Primarch counted 20 figures, some of which seemed familiar to him, while others did not look at all as he expected. All of them had barely noticeable differences, almost deviations, which seemed troubling to Ferrus. The last sculpture was in the middle of the staircase and looked straight at the Primarch. Its hands were spread to the sides, as if the statue was inviting Ferrus into its embrace. Unlike the others, it was clad in a luxurious robe with many ornaments. The mask on its face was beautiful, almost perfect, if not for the sharp cuts for the eyes and 2 sharp angles of the cheekbones. Guessing who the marble titan represented, Ferrus Manus uttered the name Fulgrim. Then a serpentine hissing sounded next to the Primarch, similar to stone scraping or the blowing of the wind. The words Angel Exterminatus, which the voice kept repeating, meant nothing to Ferrus. He did not understand them, but guessed that behind the strange phrase lay an ominous meaning. The Lord of the Iron Hands felt that death capable of catching up to him if he lingered too long lay hidden in this mysterious place. He moved on, overcoming flight after flight, and driving the image of Fulgrim, which in the execution by the marble statue turned into a traitor, out of his memory. Realizing the thought that had been instilled in him, the Gorgon finally convinced himself that he had indeed not fallen into a cave hidden beneath the surface. Enemies had placed him in an incomprehensible trap. Finding himself again in a chamber divided by a fissured vault, the Primarch met 2 monstrous birds, which at first seemed to him to be a single whole. They looked like emaciated and wounded scavengers, although each still retained remnants of once luxurious golden plumage. Looking at them, Ferrus felt pity and, unexpectedly for himself, was glad that he would not have to kill these tormented birds that turned out to be eagles upon closer inspection. Their sad appearance made him think that death might be a merciful end to their suffering. One of the eagles soared upward and disappeared into the fissure of the vault. The Primarch envied it, as the bird could escape from the cave. The other eagle, on the contrary, headed deeper into the dark hall, and Ferrus had no choice but to follow it. Now the Gorgon realized that the first bird was wise and severe, while this one seemed defiant, proud, and even familiar. Following it, the Primarch entered a new hall, whose walls were adorned with jewels, shining in the darkness like stars. But taking a few more steps into the darkness, Ferrus again heard the serpentine hissing and felt an unpleasant itching around his neck. The light of the stars faded, but the Gorgon felt no fear, only anger, and a desire to quickly reach those who had captured him. The darkness receded, revealing to the Primarch a terrible picture. The snow-white walls were smeared with the mud and blood of many people who had died on their knees. Ferrus beheld the hapless begging for salvation, and beside them executioners holding blades to their ears and bellies. From the ceiling hung thousands of heads, which slowly swayed in the wind, all faces frozen in an expression of agony, some in a silent scream, others with teeth clenched tight. Gazing at them, the Gorgon felt an itch on his neck anew, now transformed into phantom pain from a wound the Primarch had never received. Shaken by the thought that such a thing could happen, Ferrus suddenly realized that every severed head on the ceiling bore his face. The discovery was nightmarish, but the Gorgon did not lose courage. The Primarch pondered that he would most likely live through a millennium, for no one knows the limits of the Emperor's genetic science. And yet, as a warrior like many other glorious sons of Medusa, he understood that he might die in battle. Death did not frighten him. The main thing was that it be glorious. So believed the Gorgon, that someday the war would end and peace would reign in the Imperium, a world in which Ferrus saw no meaning in his existence. The dead copies of his own head brought a smile to the Primarch's face. He even loudly joked that he could have made them more beautiful. These words again reminded the Gorgon of Fulgrim. Moving forward, Ferrus found himself in a place where his dead copies hung so densely that he had to carefully part them with his warhammer. Then the heads spoke in unison, accusing the Primarch. Some touched him with their lips, others tried to bite. They called the Primarch weak and an unnecessary son, touching the vulnerable parts of his soul. On Medusa he was a king, the most powerful warrior, but the Emperor took him and made him accept the role of one among many. Alien thoughts forced the Gorgon to compare himself with his brothers, saying that only the best sons of the Emperor, such as the glorious Horus and the magnificent Sanguinius, would carry out the father's plan, while all the rest had to simply wait on the sidelines. But Ferrus was not vain, and the insults failed to achieve their goal. He knew that the Emperor would not have brought him out of the shadows only to relegate him to the background, giving him subordinate missions. In the Great Crusade, all goals were significant, and the Primarch was pleased with the place that his father had allotted for him. He did not notice how he lost the Forgebreaker, and took in his hand a blade once forged by Vulcan. A memory of his brother gave Ferrus strength. A silvery silhouette flickered nearby, reminding the Gorgon of the battle with Aseroth. The Primarch felt as if the ghostly serpent had bitten him, and therefore Ferrus cut his skin to remove the poison. The dead heads around incessantly screamed in his own voice, distracting and driving him mad. The pain around his neck became unbearable, but despite everything, the Gorgon still managed to catch the silvery monster. In its hissing, a mysterious phrase was heard again, and its mere repetition caused pain in the Primarch's head. The Primarch was struggling to control himself as poison still tainted his body. He wounded the monster, which immediately vanished, then gripped his hammer again and proceeded to the next hall, preparing to engage in a new battle. He found himself in a room that resembled both a majestic yet ruined palace and a golden tomb simultaneously. At the center of the hall, a massive throne covered in millennia-old cobwebs towered. Atop it sat the fleshless skeleton of the king of a decaying empire. The corpse was a giant even compared to the Primarch, and Ferrus believed he was looking at his next opponent. Yet the cadaver remained motionless, and suddenly Aseroth reappeared. The Gorgon seized the monster, intending to strangle it, but then the silver worm turned, revealing a beautiful human face. With a voice familiar to Ferrus, the monster confessed it was not Aseroth, though the Primarch had already known this, as well as recognized the face of the friend before him. The Xenos that trapped the Gorgon wanted him to believe Fulgrim was his enemy. Ferrus killed the monster bearing his brother's face, yet doubts never arose in his soul. Afterwards, the Primarch destroyed the king's corpse and his throne, behind which lay a portal that revealed a view into the infinite starry space. The Gorgon saw a planet being ignited and turned into a charred sphere, reminding Ferrus of his nightmares about the battle in the Black Sands. An Eldar that appeared soon after told the Primarch he was looking at his own future. According to the seer, the Gorgon was on a path leading to death, but there was another path which, if chosen, Ferrus Manus could save the galaxy. The Xenos claimed the Primarch did not realize how important he was, that it was within his power to change everything, to bring hope to those alive. The Eldar addressed the Gorgon as a friend, but the Emperor's son could not accept his warning. Ferrus stated he knew of his own death as well as remembered his role and duty. He refused to submit to fate like the Xenos, considering himself a man forging his own path. The seer's pleas went unheard. The Xenos offered life, but the Primarch, giving in to rage, preferred to perish as a warrior rather than heed the words of an alien. With a furious roar, the Gorgon shattered the fabric of the psychic labyrinth constructed around him, attacked the Eldar, and broke free. Realizing their plan had failed, the Xenos retreated from the planet. In the final stages of the Great Crusade, the 10th Legion encountered a civilization known in history as the Diasporex, a state that was a multicultural confederation where humans and Xenos coexisted peacefully. The Iron Hands shared the imperial truth with the Diasporex and suggested its human part to sever ties with allies of other races. However, this proposition was rejected. Ferrus Manus had no other option. He initiated a war. As much as the traitors of humanity were despised, the Iron Hands could not but acknowledge their mastery. For the duration of 5 months, the ships of the Diasporex simply avoided encounters with the fleet of the 10th Legion, and did so with such skill that it inspired admiration even among the most stern captains. Ferrus Manus believed that the destruction of the Diasporex would be a tragedy, for which the foolishness of those who preferred an alliance with Xenos over the Imperium was to blame. However, the high-space combat skills that the enemy definitely possessed compelled the Primarch to request reinforcement. The Emperor's children arrived to assist. Together with Fulgrim, the combined strike forces of the 2 legions attacked the Diasporex fleet, which for some unknown reason refused to leave the sector for a safer place. Soon, the reconnaissance ships of the Iron Hands discovered the reason. The enemies could not leave due to hidden solar energy generators used by the Diasporex as fuel sources. During the large-scale battle in which the flagship of the Emperor's children came under attack, Ferrus Manus rushed to aid his brother, covering his ship with his own battleship, the Iron Fist. But Fulgrim did not appreciate this selfless act. The Primarch, already tainted by corruption, rejected the thought that he would not have survived the encounter if the Gorgon had not risked his flagship and life for him. Fulgrim, confident in his own narrative, saw only prideful boasting and an intention to insult, failing to recognize the heroism of his brother. In the final battle, the Imperial forces managed to draw the Diasporex into open combat near the star Corollis and destroyed the enemy fleet. Afterward, all surviving Xenos were killed, and their human allies were taken prisoners and delivered to the nearest Imperium world as slaves. Following the onset of the Horus heresy, Fulgrim promised the War Master to sway Ferrus Manus to the traitor's side. The Phoenician and the Gorgon met aboard the flagship of the Iron Hands, where a tense conversation between them culminated in a confrontation. Fulgrim, believing he could persuade his closest friend of the righteousness of Lupercal's actions, claimed that the Emperor had abandoned the Great Crusade because he was preoccupied with plans for his own apotheosis, viewing the Primarchs merely as tools necessary for reclaiming the galaxy. According to Fulgrim, the Emperor was a liar, not a living perfection, and his entire project was merely preparation for his own deification. These claims by the Phoenician saddened Ferrus Manus. Fulgrim was dear to him and had never lied before, but such speeches about the Emperor shattered their friendship. Realizing that his brother spoke with absolute sincerity, the Gorgon was driven to despair. He now felt obligated to kill Fulgrim. The Primarch of the Iron Hands drew the Forge Breaker and directed the weapon at its creator. Fulgrim did the same with his Fireblade. The brothers clashed in a duel, exchanging blows capable of penetrating the armor of a dreadnought. Tears of regret appeared in the eyes of Ferrus, inducing Fulgrim, who had already fallen under the influence of a demon, to want to throw away his weapon and embrace his former comrade, to together share the astonishing emotion. The Phoenician wished to convey to his brother that their confrontation was meaningless, as the warrior could not be defeated, but the Gorgon refused to listen to the traitor's words. Ferrus seized the blade of the flaming sword, and with the help of his silver hands, managed to split it and then to detonate it with such force that the Primarchs were thrown apart from each other. Fulgrim came to his senses first, finding the Gorgon sprawled on the floor. The Phoenician managed to pick up a warhammer and raised it over Ferrus's head, but at the last moment his hand trembled. Turning to his brother, the Phoenician said that he would follow him into death, and from this did not understand why the Gorgon would not do the same for him. To this, Ferrus Manus replied that he no longer considered Fulgrim his brother. Then the hand of the Emperor's children Primarch did strike, strong enough to knock unconscious but not to kill. Contrary to Ferrus's words, the Phoenician at that moment still could not suppress the memory of their great friendship and did not want to kill the Gorgon. Leaving the flagship of the Iron Hands, Fulgrim did not take the shattered flaming blade. Instead, he took the Forge Breaker with him. The recovery took Ferrus about 2 weeks, during which he did not leave his quarters, as the mental anguish from his brother's actions exceeded the physical. The blow from the Phoenician disfigured the Gorgon's face, and it was never the same again. For these reasons, the Primarch gladly complied with the order to fight against the traitors at Istvan V with the support of the Salamanders and the Raven Guard. Leading the force of loyalists, the father of the Iron Hands directed Vulcan's legion to the left flank of the battle line, Corax to the right, while he himself, with 10 companies of elite Terminators Morlocks, attacked the central positions. The defenders of the Imperium outnumbered the servants of Chaos, but Horus was aware of the anticipated landing site, and the slaughter began even before all the loyalists could set foot on the planet. The Iron Hands, Salamanders and Raven Guard managed to strengthen their positions in the Urgal Depression, but this came at the cost of many warriors' lives. The losses enraged Ferrus and made him ignore the words of his brothers, who asked for thoughtful action. The Gorgon rushed in pursuit of the traitors, hoping to engage in combat with Fulgrim. The 10th Legion followed their father, leading to one of the most epic battles of that period. On the fields of Istvan V, about 60,000 Space Marines clashed. Ferrus Manus fought, crushing enemies with his silver fists, while the flaming sword, restored and reforged, was fastened to his thigh. Not a single projectile nor blade could harm the Primarch, but every blow of his ended in the death of one of the traitors. He did not use the sword, for it was no longer a weapon, but an instrument of execution intended for a single enemy. The Primarch remembered that as long as the outcome of the battle was undetermined, he must not forget his duty as a commander, yet he rejected this thought, desiring to end his long friendship with Fulgrim as soon as possible. Unquenchable anger almost robbed him of his sanity, but it could not obscure the catastrophes happening on the fields of Istvan V. Ferrus saw the betrayal and understood that after this battle the Imperium would change. The Astartes would tarnish their honor, and people would rightly fear them. Finally facing Fulgrim, the Primarch of the Iron Hands unsheathed his fireblade, and the Phoenician, following his example, drew the Forge Breaker from behind. They engaged in battle once more, but this time both sought to kill, delivering blows with a hatred only former brothers could muster. The Phoenician struck down the Gorgon to his knees with a single hammer blow, and Ferrus knocked him down by piercing him with his blade. The Primarch of the 10th Legion managed to rise first, but his strike was stopped by the blade of the Lair, endowing Fulgrim with monstrous strength. The Phoenician managed to pierce Ferrus's chest with the silver blade, and once again brought his brother to his knees. The Primarch of the Emperor's children froze. Struck by a sudden realization of the wrongdoing, he tried to discard his cursed weapon, but his muscles no longer obeyed him. Moments before Ferrus could grasp his own sword, Fulgrim decapitated his brother. At that moment, a beam of powerful energy burst from the body of the Gorgon, along with blood, forcing the Phoenician to drop his blade and stagger. Ghostly whirls blinded Fulgrim and could have torn him apart had not the presence of the demon, which already dwelled within him, protected him. Ferrus Manus perished on Istvan V at the hand of his closest brother, and the shocked Iron Hands barely escaped the traitor's trap and left the planet. The 10th Legion lost a huge part of its contingent and spirit, which deprived it of the possibility to play a significant role in the further war for the Imperium. After the battle on Istvan V, Fulgrim delivered the head of Ferrus Manus to the War Master as proof of his victory. Looking at it, Horus lamented that had the Primarch of the Iron Hands been on his side, the rebellion would have proceeded much more smoothly. After the event of the heresy, the head of the Gorgon ended up with Robuta Guilliman, who traded it to the Iron Hands in exchange for their agreement to accept the Codex Astartes. Since then, the Primarch's skull has been kept on an altar in a large reliquary hidden within the citadel of the Eye of Medusa. This place, buried under the shifting lithosphere plates, is the most fortified fortress of the Order. Within the heart of Ferrus Manus's native planet, amongst the intricate passageways of the fractal labyrinth, beyond the remnants of the Gorgon, a silent guardian Astartes perpetually watches, who neither eats nor sleeps. Despite the clear evidence of the Primarch's death, numerous theories that harbour hope for his return exist, one of which claims that the Emperor could resurrect the Gorgon, found its basis during the final battle of the war in the Webway, fighting against the hordes of the Chaos Demons. The Master of Mankind needed the aid of his loyal sons, and indeed temporarily revived Ferrus Manus, who appeared in the form of a fiery giant. The Iron Hands retell naive legends to each other, according to which their Primarch did not truly perish, and his death, a fiction created by himself to temper his sons, making them even stronger. The orphaned Space Marines believe that in reality their father resides in the mirror mazes of the Eye of Medusa. And one day, when one of the Astartes can find him, Ferrus will return to unveil his wisdom to his sons.